All right, and welcome. We are live. It's been a while since we've gone live, but welcome everybody who's watching here, either live or on the recording. Appreciate that. Let me get this time lapse recording started. So, yeah, if you guys haven't been here in a while, my new setup is that I'm going to be doing a live stream here. So, we've got a camera that's focused on the painting, a camera that's focused on me, and then I've also got another camera over here that's recording a time lapse version of this that'll go up a little bit later on after this is done. So, I hope that you guys can hear me okay and that everything's all set up correctly. You might notice up in the corner there, I'm streaming through StreamYard again. Just kind of simplifies some things. So I appreciate you joining me. As a part of this live stream, I'm going to be doing some landscape painting. I also have a link in the description. So what I'm going to be doing is, because June is my birthday month, I'm going to be collecting some money for the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which is a charitable organization that does a lot of good work for people who are having trouble making ends meet. They are able to go to people and counsel them on finances and things like that. And if they're in need of a dining room table or a bed for the kids or something like that, they can source those donations and give those out to people. So it's a really cool organization. So if you're feeling that you want to donate to that, I've got a up at the top over here is a little bar that should be increasing as people donate. If you'd like to donate, feel free to go to that link in the description. If you don't want to donate, or if you'd prefer to donate to a different worthy charity, feel free to do that. If you would not want to donate to a charity, feel free to do that. It's all just basically for fun and to do some good. So what I'm going to do is start off over here, and I've put in a little layer of blue just for the sky here, maybe a little bit of blue down here for some water that may or may not end up coming to fruition. We'll see. But this is actually watercolor that's down. This is a watercolor sketchbook. So this is from a previous live stream of a lionfish that I did. Um, Here's some waves and a seascape. So this is just a watercolor book. It's just full of blank watercolor paper. Got it at Hobby Lobby for 15 or 20 bucks or something like that. And I've really enjoyed it so far. Just for starters, off on the palette, I'm using just tinfoil over a piece of cardboard, which I find works pretty well. I can just throw the tinfoil away at the end of it, and that kind of takes care of things. So right here we've got matte fluid medium, which is acrylic. This is all acrylic paint. So this matte fluid medium helps the colors mix and makes them more transparent, but it keeps sort of the body of the paint intact. So it still keeps them thick, but it thins them out in terms of their color, in terms of transparency. This is raw sienna, which is a brown, a thick titanium white up here, sort of like a tomato cadmium red up here, Indian yellow, which is a little bit of a sort of um, darker yellow, not quite like a primary yellow that's really, really bright. And then over here is a cobalt blue. So that's what I'm going to be using. And what I think I'll start off with is I'll go into a little bit of the matte fluid medium, and I'll pick off a little bit of white paint. And I'll just go in and I'll paint some cloud shapes in the background. I think I'm going to need a little bit more white than that. That came out pretty light in color. There we go. That's a little bit better. I don't want these clouds to be super distinctive or anything like that. I kind of like to keep them a little bit airier and in the distance. There's a little bit of that thick paint that you see. You can probably see a little bit of texture. Actually, I've got a little bit of light coming from this direction, so you can really see the shadow caused by that thicker paint. Makes it look a little bit, maybe a little bit weird. But I think in the end it'll dry and it'll look just fine. Come across here. Oh, looks like somebody named Jim just supported me. Thanks a lot for that. Appreciate that. Yeah, I set the goal at $100. I don't know. I really had no idea what to expect. I know that the audience is pretty little at this point, so any little bit of good that we can do is good by me. So I'll be collecting money from now until the end of the day tomorrow, which is June 18th. And whatever I've collected at that point will just go to the St. Vincent de Paul Society, and we will call it good. And I appreciate anybody's generosity. It really does mean a lot if we can If we can do some good, that's good. Get some cloud shapes in there. I might do some touch-ups on these a little bit later, but I just kind of want to get some rough shapes in the background. And I'm thinking that there's going to be some mountains that go in the far background here. So we don't need to worry too much about what's going on at this point. In order to paint those mountains, I'm going to use a flat brush, just as the namesake suggests, it's just flat across there like that. And to get my base sort of color for those mountains, I want them to be cool. What I'm planning to do at the end of this painting is to paint like a branch that's in sort of the extreme foreground. So like we're kind of looking through a tree almost, and maybe have some cherry blossoms that come off of it. And because of that, I'm going to try to keep all of the background stuff pretty cool in terms of color. So lots of blues and bluish greens, bluish purples, stuff like that. So that in that case, what I can do is really kind of get a little bit of punch out of it, where we have like that pinkish red that you see in the cherry blossoms. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of the raw sienna color, which is brown. Hopefully I didn't lose everybody. Oh, looks like we're back. Okay, good. Let me know if I do drop out. I have things hooked up to Ethernet, but it seems like things may have been a little bit weird there. Hopefully not. All right. And I'll just go in and put in some basic shapes in the background. And something that I think is a bit of a struggle sometimes with painting is that it's tendency to be overly focused on too much detail. And all this stuff that's happening here is way off in distance. A lot of air between the viewer and what we're seeing. So the shapes often end up being very indistinct. Let me see. Let me know in the comments if things are weird with the stream. I'm not sure if we're kind of cutting in and out, something like that. It's tough for me to go here as I'm painting. Hope not, but if we are, I'll do my best. So we got just sort of like some rough shapes for those. I'll kind of fill in a little bit. I'm going to use a little bit of the matte fluid medium to kind of extend paint that I have. Actually, I want this to fade out as we get more to the base of the mountains anyway. So I don't want it to be super dark down here. I want it to be lighter, closer to the bottom of the mountains. And that matte fluid medium, like I said, it keeps the body of the paint, but makes it more transparent. And when I say the body of the paint, what I mean the thickness of the paint itself. So it's it being thick, but it decreases the punch and the color of the paint, makes it more transparent so that you can't see it. I'm going to actually, so from a previous painting, you probably can't see it on screen, but there's actually a little dot of paint that must have dribbled over from a previous painting. So I'm going to extend this mountain up like that and cover it up. It's one of the really cool things about painting. So you can just kind of insert things and things around as you need. And most of the time it works out. I'm using more matte fluid now to feather the bottom of these, make it so that it fades out, and maybe gives us a little bit of like a mist effect. And I'm even going to go into a little bit of that white color. So we get like a little bit of a misty effect down here. All right. going to do is give these mountains some dimension. So I need to give them a bright side and a dark side, so that that kind of gives them shape. You can see where the light's hitting it, see where the light's not quite making it to it, it's being in shadow. That's what I'm going to do now. So for starters, what I'm going to do is go into a little bit of a light color. So I'm going to go probably white with maybe a very small touch of blue. And this is going to have a little bit of the brown with it as well. I'm going to kind of tie this together. So I'm going to, the light is coming from this direction here. So we're going to see some of these shapes on this mountain going down that way. The size of this is probably like, I don't even know, probably 8 by maybe 5.5. And if you've been around for other streams, you know that I tend to bite off a little bit more than I can chew and be a little bit overly ambitious in terms of what I can get done. So I'm thinking that I'll be able to make a painting of this size in roughly the time that I'm looking to do here. At least that's what I'm hoping. Because this white paint that I'm using is thicker, I can kind of just dab in shapes and the paint will kind of come off in globs, which is actually perfect for these very hazy detail, snowy clumps that are back here. So let me just fill in a couple more of these details. As we come around, I'm anticipating that maybe the sunlight is coming a little bit from behind us as the viewer even. So the places where the bright shapes are actually going to change ever so slightly as we go around. Put a little bit of highlight in some of these areas that are a little bit darker just to give it a little bit of interest. And then I'm going to wash off my brush and I'm going to do a similar thing, but for the shadow shapes. So I'll keep that same sort of brownish color that I used for the main body of the mountain, but I'll put in a little bit of white so that it's not super dark and a little bit of blue. Again, kind of trying to keep the colors inside the whole mountain a little bit harmonious, just so that it doesn't look like you took one Crayola marker, colored part of it, and you took a different Crayola marker and colored a different part of it, if you know what I mean. And that blue has a tendency to kind of cool things down and give it just a little bit of interest and shape. I'm going to need a little bit more blue because right now the color isn't, there we go, super well defined from just the base mountain color that I had. I've been doing some courses on a website called Domestica about art. I was doing one that was based around digital art, which is interesting to me, especially being a guy that has done a lot more traditional paintings where it's, you know, actual paint and canvas and everything like that. It's definitely a different way to think about things. I know a lot of people do incredible digital art, but I was never a person who could really wrap my mind around it for whatever reason. So I'm trying to get a little bit better at that and experiment with some new things. For anybody who's just joining, I'm working on a landscape painting here. And if you have any questions or comments or want to ask anything, feel free to throw it up in the chat. Let me know how things are going. All right. So what I'm going to do now is probably put in like a little line of trees in front of this far away mountain range. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to take some blue and a little bit of red and mix up sort of a cool purplish color. So it's going to be a little bit darker than the background sky right there. And I'm going to apply some of that matte fluid medium to it. I'll probably water it down a little bit with some water. One of the cool things about acrylics is that you can use medium, so media, So like this matte fluid medium that I keep mentioning, but you can also thin things down with water. So it's very easy to try different things and produce different effects. Right now I feel like I have a little bit too much in my brush, but this is almost like um, a second little layer of mountains back there. Right now the bristles of my brush are not really helping me on this one. Looking to get a little bit more precise, so I'm going to grab a different brush here. Still a flat brush, but a little bit different, a little bit thinner, and the bristles are behaving with me a little bit better. So I'm going to put in more like a far away mountain range back there. Kind of suggests that maybe there's more mountains that are way in the background. And it's just adding a plane to the painting. So as you kind of move forward, you're kind of going through more and more planes. And that kind of thing kind of gives you the feeling of atmosphere and depth, and like this might be a real place. This isn't based off of any real location. I don't have a picture off to the side that I'm going off of. This is all off of imagination. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in some just shapes for trees and so forth. So let's see. I'm going to go with some of the brown, but I'm also going to mix up it into it a little bit of green. So I'm going to take some of the Indian yellow that I have, some of the cobalt blue. That'll make green, and I'll bring in a little bit of the brown color to darken it as well. So I've got my flat brush once again. And this is very wet. You can tell by how transparent it is. And that's good because I'm still painting things that are very, very far back in the distance. And towards the bottom, I'm just sort of going to feather things out a little bit. I feel like I still have too much color in my brush for what I'm looking to do here. So rinse it out. There we go. As we go out, we'll have that green color up at the top, and then we'll have sort of this faded, chalky, sort of cloudy, maybe haze towards the bottom, which is exactly what I'm looking for right now. That's perfect. I want a little bit more of that over here. I'm just going to go straight across because this is so watery at this point that the paper will kind of take it and soak it in a little bit. So that's good. And then what I'll do is, instead of mixing brown into that green color, I'm going to take the Indian yellow and the blue, and maybe a little bit of white this time to get kind of a highlighted greenish color. And I'm still favoring the blues here so that the green color that we're doing comes out being a little bit cooler. Because like I said, I want that punchiness of the reds and the warm colors that I'm going to add later on. And with color, you can't really have light without dark. So, and you can't really have warm without cool. So it's important to kind of balance those two factors. Rinse out my brush. And I'm kind of going to dab at those spots a little bit because they shouldn't really be distinct at this point. So I want to try to remove the brush marks that you can see and kind of try to lose some of the edges, kind of knock them off and make them a little bit less sharp in terms of their edges. All right. Next step, I think what we're going to do is start to put in some land masses that are kind of protruding out into the water here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a very dark color. I'll start off with brown and blue and a little bit of red. So essentially, I'm taking a deep purplish color and mixing it in with the brown. So you end up, you don't, I'm not, I don't have any black on my palette right now, but I'm going to get pretty close by doing this. It's going to be a very dark, dark color like that. And there's quite a bit of paint here, so this is going to be wet for a while. So I kind of need to be cognizant of that. Come in from both sides. Some people really enjoy painting wet on wet, which is the technique that Bob Ross and a lot of other people like that have used because it allows you to paint quickly. I don't really favor that as much. I find it a lot harder to control things. I find that I'm often zooming out of control pretty quickly when I do that. Let's see if we can get it back. I don't know if we're here or not. I hope so. Yeah, I am not sure what is happening with the internet at the moment, but life goes on. I do apologize, though, because I do try to make this as good as possible, even though I'm not an expert by any means. So yeah, I don't know if you guys were gone or if I was gone or what was going on there, but I just laid in a couple of shades of green on these little knolls that are kind of sticking out. And what I'm going to do is brighten these up now and give them sort of the appearance of having real grass on them. So that's what I'm going to do now. And I think what I'm going to do is switch over to a fan brush for this. Because what I can do with that is kind of, with a fan brush, shape like this. So you can kind of pull up and create sort of this nice feathered sort of look. So I'll get the bristles a little bit wet. I'll come in here and pull in some of my green color, some of the white color. Sort of load those bristles. Just sort of dab my way around here. Give it a little bit of different texture and appearance. And then I will go through with a little bit of a damp brush and kind of dab around, clean up some of those edges so that they're not quite so sharp. Give that appearance of grass. This is very wet right now. That's okay. We'll make do. And then the same over here. Painting right-handed because my camera setup is in the way. Normally a southpaw, but sometimes you just make do, and it's fine. And for this type of work, it's not like we need a lot of precision. We're painting grass, and as anybody who's ever mowed grass knows, it doesn't grow with a lot of precision, so that's okay. Sort of trying to emulate the randomness of nature. Just like that. And then I'll go in with my damp flat brush and clean up some of these edges again. And again, basically looking for the texture that sort of suggests that this is made out of, that this is grass that's growing here. Like that. And then what I'm thinking I'm going to do is over here, I'm thinking maybe this is actually like water that's sort of spilling over into this little pond, which is what I'm going to go after. So I need to paint the stuff behind it before I can paint the stuff in front of it really well. So I am going to go in and grab a little bit of the brown color, mix it with a little bit of white and the Indian yellow to get sort of a tannish color. So maybe it looks like sand or something like that is kind of the look that I'm going for. And I'm going to put that along the bank here. Thin it out a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to go with a very light touch to push it up towards the grassy area so that naturally it's going to kind of resolve and fade into that grassy dirt sort of look. The same thing is going to happen over here. Like that. Sometimes with acrylics, it's a little bit tough to see, and you kind of see me sort of, bob and weave a little bit. But that's just because acrylics are naturally kind of glossy. So especially when you have lighting where you're trying to light things so that they appear on a live stream like this, sometimes the shadows and the glare can kind of make it difficult to see what the actual color that's down on the page is. So that's why you see me kind of do that every now and then. So what I'll do now is I'm going to take my palette knife here. It's just like a little spatula type thing, but it's got a nice flat straight edge. So what I'm going to do is use that to kind of make a little water line. So I'm going to take some of that matte fluid medium, go through the white paint, maybe get a little bit of water on there to thin things out. I like using the thicker paint. The only problem is that when you're trying to do fine, precise details, that thick paint can become very gloppy very fast. It becomes a little bit difficult at times to work with. That's good enough. What I'm going to do, you see this kind of coming up like that. That's not really what I wanted. So what I'm going to do is come in with a brush and just sort of pick it up and make it look like it's splashing. One of the beautiful things about landscapes is there's so many combinations and so many ways that things can go with a landscape that you really can't do it. Well, I won't say that. You can definitely do it wrong. I mean, if you start, painting it upside down and trees that are growing out of, weird places and stuff like that, you can do it wrong. But there's so many ways that nature kind of grows and happens that it's easy to, if you make a little error like I just did where it's not quite straight, you just make it look like a little splash is coming up or something like that. And that kind of ties everything together and makes it look natural once again, which is really cool. Before I put the palette knife away, I'm going to actually do that back here as well. Put a little bit of a water line back there. I'm actually going to take a small liner brush and do that because the palette knife isn't giving me the results that I would like right now. So there's always more than one way to get it done. Just like that. Always got to be cognizant as a lefty. I just put my hand in one of the clouds up there. It's actually still a little bit wet. That surprised me. I didn't think that it would be. That's all right. Now, what I'm going to do is make a little bit of paint here so that it looks like there's some water sort of crashing down into this little pond area here. And the way that I'm going to do that is with my flat brush once again, go into some white paint, thin it out with the matte fluid medium, add just a tiny amount of blue because the blue is going to really supersede the white here, and that's not what I want. And I will come in here and white's not quite powerful enough, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint. I thinned it out a little bit too much, so I'm just adding a little bit more paint to counteract that. And you notice that I've loaded my bristles in such a way that they kind of flatten out a little bit. It's just sort of flopping down like that. It's not too much going on there. I'll add a little bit of white into the background as well. These could just be like little splashes that are happening way back there. All right. So I think that about does it for that. What I wanted to do as well is to include on the left side of, or the right side of the painting, I wanted to include some little purple flowers. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of the cobalt blue and a little bit of the red that I have. And I'll add some white to brighten it up a little bit so that it's not super dark. Maybe I'll add in a little bit of yellow too, to kind of brighten it even further. just add some little dabs of color over here. Maybe there's some lilacs or something that are growing over here. Maybe up on this hill too. Just some little indications of bushes or flowers and stuff like that. That's pretty good. I'm gonna make this a little, like a little pathway. Need a little bit more brown to cover the purple that's still in my brush. Maybe make that like a little place where people can walk up to the side. And then finally, what I'm going to do is paint this branch and put in some cherry blossoms like I mentioned. So I'm going to go for a dark color again. So what I'm going to do is go brown, blue, and red. That way I mix in a deeper purple color with that brown. That'll give me a very, very dark color. Now's a time where I have to make some decisions here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the branch come in this way down into the painting. So it'll come right across those mountains there. Branches have a tendency to get thicker as you get closer to the trunk and thinner as you get out from them. So that's going to be my thickest trunk that I'm going to use, or branch rather. And then there will be a little branch coming off like this. And maybe a little branch coming off like that. And maybe another couple little branches that come here. Just like that. And what I'm going to do now is create a little bit of a lighter variety of that brown that I just did to, again, kind of show the dimensionality and show where the light is hitting it. So I'll come in and go brown, Indian yellow, and white. I'm hoping that this will get me sort of in the neighborhood of a tannish brown color. Maybe mix in a little bit of red too. And I'm going to apply that to the spots where I think the light will be touching the branch. And I'm going to be reloading my brush pretty frequently here, just because as my brush goes down these branches, it's picking up some of the darker color that's already down and is still wet. This is what I was talking about the painting wet on wet. It's a wonderful technique, but it never really worked for me that well. And it could be that I'm just a little bit heavier handed with my paint. I don't know. To each their own. And now that I have all this wet paint on the canvas, or the paper in this case, what I'm going to do is come in with a slightly damp brush in just a moment, and I'm going to kind of blend things together a little bit. So I'll take this guy and make sure that he's clean, first of all, and then kind of come in and sort of feather these ending points and hopefully draw things together a little bit. Like I said, knock off some of the sharp edges. That should be good. And now what I'm going to do for these sort of cherry blossoms is, first of all, I'm going to take a look at a reference image. Um, I had this thing where I never wanted to look at reference because I always thought, oh, I should only be looking, inward at my imagination, be able to picture what it is that I'm painting. Looking at reference was somehow, you know, lower or lesser. But as I've gone along, I've noticed that, it's really important to look at reference, especially when you're first starting off, and especially when it's something that you've never seen before. I think that I had this notion that it's like, oh, well, I should just know how this looks and I should just know how to draw it or paint it. But there's a problem with that because, I mean, one, that's just not really possible, especially when you're starting off. I was watching Jim Lee do some comic book artwork at one point, and I was noticing, how he just would scribble something and then immediately go in with ink. And it's like, Jim Lee's a famous comic book artist, for those people who may not know that. Um, he kind of defined the look of Marvel Comics in the 90s. And he, he could do that. But as I started to think about it a little bit more, it's like he earned the ability to do that because he's probably drawn, I mean, how many human bodies, how many superheroes in different poses has he drawn over the course of his career? I mean, tens of thousands, probably. I mean, so I think it's easy to sit there and look at it and be like, oh, well, why can't I do that? And it's like, well, if I were to put in that much work, I probably could do it. And for now, there's no shame in looking at references of how things look, taking a peek at things, using that in my own artwork. I think that it's easy to get discouraged by things like that, but it's important not to, I think, and to remember that it's all right and that all artists use photo reference. And the real objective is to improve in what you're doing. And if that means looking at reference to get the shapes right or understand a little bit more about how the angles on something work, then it's well worth it. See, we're at about 45 minutes, so I think we're doing pretty well here. One second, I'm going to grab a little bit of just thinner white paint, which I think is going to be important for finishing off these flowers. And we're back. This thinner white paint is going to allow me to do a little bit more intricate work, which is going to be important for the bodies of the flowers that I'm going to be painting here. Cherry blossoms are really pretty. I've never really looked at them that much. I don't paint many flowers, so you guys are getting to see me struggle through and figure things out on the fly. That's all right. And I'm not looking to get super duper detailed with these. This is still kind of far away from the viewer, honestly, with the way that I painted this. And that's okay. That makes it so that you don't have to judge my ability of painting flowers. I painted some flowers earlier on in this watercolor book, just some like orange, I don't remember what they were even called. I just found a picture that I thought looked pretty and tried to paint them. It's interesting to paint them because they're so delicate and like you can almost see through them at times. Like the petals, the petals of that one were orange, but I was finding that they were kind of almost taking on the color of the light that was shining on them and a little bit of the color of the background as well. It's a really neat and kind of challenging thing to try to paint, honestly. Cherry blossoms look like they have kind of a yellowish thing on the inside. I don't know if I'm going to actually be able to show that on any of these paintings or any of these flowers that I've painted here, but that's all right. Like I said, this isn't a flower painting contest. So as I'm looking at this, things that I've learned and lessons to kind of take forward, I would make the background a little bit darker here in terms of the sky and the mountains and everything. Make them a little bit darker to help the flowers stand out a little bit. I'm just noticing that there's not as much contrast between the background and the flowers as I would probably like. But ultimately, what I'll do is I'll go back in and probably take a very thin brush with some India ink and kind of outline these flowers to give them a little bit more punch and make them a little bit more defined of a focal point. Um, so that'll be a project for later down the line. And like I said, I'll post the um, time lapse of this a little bit later on, and then I'll post the finished product once everything is all said and done. I just think that overall that will produce a better result to have that a little bit more well defined. I'm going to go in now that I have this thinner white paint and mix up a little bit of purple and come in here and define, pick out some of these little flowers that are over here. Purple is probably my favorite color. I just really like that interplay between the blue and the red. I just think that it looks really nice. Little dabs and little abstract spots. Maybe I'll put a couple over here too. And then to just one final thing to finish it off, I'm going to put a little fence up here. Because I'm picturing if there's like a little trail that comes up to the side of the water here, there would probably be a little fence here to make sure that nobody fell in or anything like that while they were walking. And then it'll end up going off into the distance back there. What I'll do is I'll just connect these with a little line of brown. And maybe I'll give these a little highlight too at some point. I see that a couple of donations have come in. I really appreciate that. Any donations at the link in the description will be going to the St. Vincent de Paul Society, who does a lot of help for poverty alleviation, things like that. So that's really great. And like I said, if you'd prefer to donate to a different worthy charity, feel free. Just wanted to do some good if we could. Put a little highlight on this. And again, I apologize if there have been some technical issues on the stream. That's going to be a goal of mine, is to try to resolve those and do a little bit more testing in a non-streaming environment to make sure that whatever we've got works properly. We are getting very close to the end of this, though. So now what I'll do is I'll just go in with a little bit of highlight on this trail over here to kind of draw things out. So use yellow and brown, which is kind of my go-to color combination for this kind of thing. I sort of dab around a little bit. Then I'll take my finger, which is a little bit wet, and just sort of brush it over the top to kind of dilute things, move the paint around so that it's thicker in some spots, thinner in others. And then, I could just sit here and noodle this thing forever. So I'm going to just go and grab a little bit more brown, a little bit more blue, a little bit of yellow, and just paint in some little details here and there to kind of draw everything together. Maybe these flowers have little stems back here, and there's some little sticks and twigs and shrubs. And that's actually one thing that I think this is missing. I'll do this one last thing, and then we'll be all set. I'm going to grab a little bit larger of a brush, go into here for a darker color, maybe right there. Lay in sort of a bush shape. And then over the top of that, lay on some actually, maybe I'll go red for this, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like a reddish orange. Of course, now that I do that, I've got to clean out my brush. Sorry. That stuff that's down there is wet right at the moment, so it's going to be tough for this paint to stick to, but we're making it work. And I'll go in and touch up on that too if that doesn't look good by the time we're done here. But I appreciate you joining me here today, and I think that we're about set. So like I said, what I'll do after this is I'll go out and I'll probably outline some of those cherry blossoms to make them a little bit more of a focal point. I'll probably touch up this bush a little bit just because it got a little bit slick and wild there at the end. But then, yeah, I think we're all set. So thanks again for joining. Thanks again to anybody who donated. Thanks for bearing with it if there were some technical glitches and issues that were going on there. I appreciate it, and see you in the next one. Thanks.